welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Turn the Page. I'm your host today, Jen, and today I am joined by the writer of many things, several things, but of one beautiful and thoughtful and insightful book of essays that we are here to discuss today. Welcome to the show. Could I ask you to introduce yourself and your book, please?
Wow, thank you, Jen. Yes, I am Elizabeth Earley, so happy to be here with you. I have a couple of novels out, and this is my debut nonfiction book. It is called Little Deaths All in a Row, Essays on Sex and Death, and it is the most vulnerable thing I've ever written.
Mm. It's very vulnerable and it's and it's really lovely and moving. And what a title. Oh my gosh, that title is fantastic too.
Thank you. I love it myself. Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit more about your work and perhaps moving from fiction into nonfiction? I'm curious too if these essays were collected from over time or if they were all sort of written together with this book in mind.
Yeah, sure. So, fiction to nonfiction, I say it's all true. All fiction is true, all nonfiction is fiction.
Mm.
And it's kind of funny how those lines blur, but they always have blurred for me as a writer because I think, we're not all Stephen King. We don't have the imagination of, writers like that. I definitely don't. I write what I know, I write what I live. So my fiction characters are me, and my this is the first time that I've put my own name on my main character and and owned the experiences as my own. Um, so I think really, yeah, that's how I feel about those two sort of not forms, but categories of writing. Yeah. Yeah. So, my journey of writing this collection was different and fun. I set out to write about this topic and I did a lot of research and I thought that it was going to be one thing, but then it turned into a whole different thing, as these projects tend to do. And I think the largest part of writing this book for me was the research part. And I love that. It's one of my favorite parts of writing. Um, So I spent a lot of time doing research, reading books, understanding what the thinking has been before I came along about the connections between these two seemingly opposed ideas and forces in the human condition. And then I also wanted to really weave into the collection, which didn't get too much in there in the end. Um, People's ideas of what they think after what happens after we die. And so I spent a lot of time interviewing and talking to psychic mediums or people who claim to be those. That was really fun, but not a lot of that material ended up in the book. So it was very lightly touched on, I think. So you never know. I think I knew that I was driven by these two ideas and how they're connected. And I wanted to write about them for a long time. And so I just dove into the sort of research and learning phase with an open mind. And then all of the essays kind of tumbled out in probably a year's time from start to finish. Yeah.
You do a lot of research in this, and you combine that with, as you said, your discussions with other people, as well as some of your own memories and experiences. Did putting all of these things in context together, and then putting it on the page, did it affect or give you any new insights into either your own experience or those of others? I'm wondering about, there's so many big topics that you deal with, and you use so many different sort of analytical frameworks to look at it all. Yeah, was there any did you have any personal insights in the process of putting the collection together and editing it that you didn't have before you started?
So many. Yeah, so many personal insights. I think that understanding first of all, my hospice volunteer work, which is a big part of the personal stories in the collection, was my attempt to overcome my fear of death, which I've always had and which is pretty big. And another topic in my personal experiences is the near fatal motorcycle accident I had, which in that moment while I was bleeding to death on the hood of a car, believing that I was in the midst of dying and about to die, I had the first panic attack that I've ever had in my life. Full blown, hyperventilating, freaking out panic attack. And that bothered me later on. I felt like I don't want to be completely freaking out the next time I meet death. I would much rather have some peace in my mind and some acceptance and even gratitude for that rite of passage. And so how do I overcome this really big, very visceral, sort of automatic fear that I have and that takes over me about the fact that my body is going to stop and end? And the way that I know to get over fears is to get closer to those things that we're afraid of, to get more intimate with them. And then they tend to become friendly and familiar and the energy completely changes with them. So, and the fear goes away. So that's what I was doing with these hospice patients. But what I didn't know when I started out is that I also had a fear of love. Didn't know that I had that. And it didn't occur to me until much later, and even in the act of writing these essays, that although I didn't meet my goal of overcoming my fear of death, I did overcome my fear of love. And I did that without even knowing that I had the fear in the first place. And it was through just sort of the ability and the honor and the willingness to have such deep, loving, intimate experiences with total strangers who are at death's door.
Mhm. Yeah, that sounds really powerful. And again, as we start, I think we were saying before that we started recording, vulnerable work because you are facing your own fears and staying with people and staying present through their own very vulnerable moments. I feel like a lot of what you've been talking about with the sort of the relationship between sex and death, um, is about like embracing paradox or complicating binaries in some way and showing how things are like interrelated rather than oppositional. Because I feel like the combination of your memories, your own like emotional and personal journey, the science, it's also like resolving sort of like false binaries about the head and the heart, or the body and the mind, or the body and the soul, or what have you. Is that something that you were aware of while working on it too, or thinking about?
That was another insight that came to me, and it was after the essays sort of fell together, and I noticed that theme. And it was only after that I noticed that theme that I came up with that analogy of the shelled creatures and the bivalves. And I think that it's such a beautiful analogy for this whole relative world and universe that we find ourselves in as humans. We absolutely live by these binaries. They define us. Without them, honestly, we couldn't exist. It's one of the laws of physical nature that we have these binaries. However, when you really look at them, when you really think about them, when you really consider them and your experiences of them, they fall apart. They don't hold up under the scrutiny of that lens. They crumble, and I love that. And I love that discovery, and yes, I want to complicate them, at the very least, destroy them. Uh, more like it.
I think it's that sort of that questioning or destruction of binaries, it can be so like terrifying, but also so freeing, like sort of that that prism of like, postmodernism or existentialism versus nihilism, like it could be extremely empowering or really terrifying. And that's, I think, really cool.
Yeah, I think you're right. It really depends on the lens you look at it with in terms of empowering or terrifying. And that's true for so many things. That's true for death. And in fact, I'm at the stage of life where we start to watch our parents decline and go and face end of life if they've had a full lifespan that some people are lucky to have to where they, you know, make it to old age and die sort of at the end of a long natural causes at the end of a long road. That's where both my parents are right now. And it's getting a little bit acute for my mom in particular. And what I'm feeling is a lot of things, definitely grief, and it's difficult to watch somebody that you love suffer and be in pain. But at the same time, I'm hyper aware that this is a rite of passage for her. And this walking through dying, whatever that journey looks like, to me, I get chills just thinking about it. It is dense with purpose. It is purely, it feels very purposeful, and it feels even, I would go as far as to say as one of the important reasons that we even come here in this and embody this form. And it doesn't seem like an accident to me either that there's a lot of pain involved with both being born and with dying. And I'm interested in this idea of pain and what its philosophical implications are. And we are so afraid of it, we push it away, we avoid it at all costs. Similarly, death. And these are both very big inevitabilities of the human condition. So, what if we instead just revered them?
Mm.
And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to bear witness to this rite of passage that my mother is walking right now, and I'm trying to have reverence and and I feel very honored to be able to show up in that way.
The experience of, I imagine, writing and then publishing and talking about this book while all of this is happening in your personal life too is probably really, I imagine, powerful and perhaps challenging. So thank you for being here. That's really lovely. Um, this is a two-part question, I guess. Is did you have a chapter or section or topic that was your favorite and that came the most easily to you, that sort of seemed to flow on the page? And the opposite, what was the most challenging part of writing this book that you encountered?
Yeah, great question. So a lot of these essays came pretty easily and in that sort of ecstatic state. I see it as ecstatic of really feeling like I am a little straw that the ocean is trying to come through, and it's just coming through, and I almost, no matter what I'm doing, in one case I was driving on the highway and I had to like pull out my phone and start talking into a recorder to get the thoughts, to capture the thoughts and the ideas. Another time I was jogging and I just kept stopping and taking down notes. Um, but I love that. I love that experience when, let's call it, for lack of a better word, the muse just grabs hold of me and forces itself onto the page through me. That is one of the things that I live for. It's just one of my favorite experiences, and the act of creating doesn't always feel like that, but when it does, it's so yummy and I love it. And a lot of these essays came in that sort of way. Two of my favorite ones to write that came in that way for sure. One was the beginning one, the invitation, and that's the one that tumbled through while I was running. And it came at the end. It was the last one that I wrote. Um, and the second was the second essay in the collection, which is called Undying. Um, and that one also sort of tumbled through me fast in probably like a 24-hour period, and I felt sort of exhausted and spent in the best way at the end of it. Like I had just been, manhandled by the muse, and she had her way with me, woman handled, I should say. But it just really kind of flowed through and took me by surprise because I wasn't really aware of the connections between my first hospice client and my first love, and those two relationships, and all of the different similarities, and little lines of threads of connection that wove their way through those two experiences. And to be able to put those together like that in that braided essay, I loved it. I loved the final product. It might be my favorite essay in the book, and it's also one of the happiest and loveliest. Um, the hardest for me to write was definitely one called Stay Hurt. And that one is just about, let's say sexual impropriety or trespass, and on both sides. Having been the perpetrator of that and having been the receiver of that. I don't want to say victim because I don't believe in victimhood, but uh I mean sometimes there is pure victimhood, but for most, like 90% of the time, for most adults who are able-bodied and of sound mind, there is not a state of victimhood. We are usually complicit in whatever we believe we're the victim of. And it's not an empowering place to dwell. So I like to, you know, stand in the illusion of power whenever I can. Um, so yeah, that was really difficult to write and difficult material to face and contend with. But I also love it. I love the product. I love how it turned out. I think it's a beautiful essay, and I'm glad that it exists. I think it's probably going to help someone.
Yeah, I feel like something that I kind of get from reading all this stuff together is a like embracing it beginner's mind, right? Like if you're talking about your first love or your first hospice patient, it's like you're doing something together for the first time, you know. And so keeping it sort of beginner, like there's something to learn from this, even if you are standing in power to, retain an aspect of humility to the process. I feel like that's like a big lesson that I also get from a lot of this too. And facing your own, yeah, your own accountability and your own past as well. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm very excited to recommend this book to people. It's really lovely. I am curious if you could tell us a little bit about some of your other ventures. I know that you are involved in the press that is releasing this, if that's correct, Jaded Ibis. And could you talk a little bit about Feminist Bookstore and Queering Reality?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Jaded Ibis Press is a small nonprofit feminist press, and it has been in existence since 2005. My first novel was published by the founder of the press. Her name is Deborah de Blasi. I'm sure she's still alive. Um, she published my first novel in 2014, and that was A Map of Everything. And then in 2015, she put the press up for sale. And so I was, out of pure fear of what would happen to my first novel, I reached out to a sister author at the press. Her name is Lily Hong. And I said, hey, let's get together and let's take over this press and let's make it something really great. Let's make it a feminist press. Let's make it a nonprofit organization. Let's, you know, even if we publish one book a year, we can do something wonderful with it. And she was excited by that. And so we did. And in 2016, I made the nonprofit organization, and it's grown. It's only grown ever since then, with grant money and different avenues of funding that I never could have dreamed possible back then that are available for nonprofits. So yeah, we went from publishing, I think that first year we published one book, the second year two, and then as the years go on, we published more and more. This year, I think it was, or in 2024, it was six, and this year also six, I think, and next year I think we have seven on the editorial calendar. So it just keeps growing, and it's beautiful thing to be a part of. And we've built a big network of connections in terms of publicity and reviews and marketing. So I feel like we're getting stronger and stronger in that area and more relevant as well. We have a lot of award-winning books. And so when it was time to shop this essay collection around, my agent was shopping it around. I got first of all, some beautiful rejections from the Big Five. Like, editors at the Big Five wrote me letters about how much they loved this collection and then didn't want to publish it. Probably because, essay collections don't make a ton of money. But I did get some offers from two other small presses. And in negotiating those contracts, what I realized was, oh, and here's the other piece, Queering Reality, which I started a year ago. It's a year old now. It is a writing and podcast series on Substack that I started and that grew virally. And now we have 100,000 subscribers, hovering right around that number. And so the more I thought about it, the more I thought I have my own built-in audience of 100,000 people. I have this press that I'm now the president of the board, and it has its big network of marketing tendrils. I think I can do better with it on my own versus going through these other third parties. So that I took that risk, and I went ahead and put it on the list for Jaded Ibis Press. But yeah, Queering Reality is something that I do twice a month. And so far, knock on wood, it's been nearly effortless. It just feels like a joy in my life to be able to write these essays and talk to these amazing people, mostly writers, mostly queer writers, but other kinds of artists and creators as well, and not all queer people. The only thing I have the only requirement to be a guest on Queering Reality is that you're at least an ally and not homophobic. Um, so yeah, it's been such a lovely, beautiful journey, and I look forward to continuing it.
That's awesome. Well, best of luck in everything you do. I really love all these ventures that you have that are working together in beautiful harmony to put some really lovely stuff out there. So thank you for taking time from your busy schedule to talk to us.
Thank you so much, Jen. It was a pleasure.
Okay, listeners, please check out Little Deaths All in a Row, Essays on Sex and Death. By the time that you hear this, it'll be out in the world. So head to your favorite bookstore or library website, wherever you like to go for your books. Perhaps go to the feminist bookstore if you're in San Diego.
Yeah.
It is time to close this chapter. We'll see you next time.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.